I think a lot of people still have a misunderstanding of blockchain. Like the actual thing that gets you product market fit is really just tackling every single 1% gain that you can for your users, which are applications and devs. And Trump, like literally the president of the United States, launched his meme coin that his wife did. Like that's like basically the only time in the last year and a half where there's been any sort of median fee spike. We have multiple teams now that are doing quantum secure Solana. Those things are going underway, and we are very much ahead of the game.
Welcome to another episode of 51 Insights. Today with Matt Sorg. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Matt, it's a pleasure to have you here. You're the VP of Technology at Solana Foundation. Can you give us an overview of how does that role look like and what do you do day by day?
Yeah, so we have a very large ecosystem in Solana, and the foundation kind of plays the facilitating role with all of the organizations involved. So foundation is roughly split up in tech and growth, and I lead some of the tech side of the org. So there's probably around 10 organizations that are very involved in the core protocol itself. We have a SIMD process, which is our Solana improvement documents, which is kind of similar to the EIP process in Ethereum. And we help run that process and facilitate governance and the developers' tools on top. So anytime runtime changes or just developer tools that applications use to make great apps. So it's like really that whole like end-to-end thing that we kind of facilitate across all those organizations. So it's never a dull moment. A lot of different personalities and organizations that have drastically different cultures, which is great because it's very balancing. And then you kind of have this back and forth and kind of annealing to really good solutions.
I can imagine. And before we jump into more technical aspects, you mentioned that Solana has a very unique technical culture. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm actually wearing this shirt. It's RusConf this week in Seattle, and a bunch of us are here. So we have this like increased bandwidth, reduced latency shirt. So like the lines get bigger, and then there's actually like a lot of little lines in there. Anyway, but that's like our culture. So it's like if you have all these different organizations and groups, and they're kind of just aligned on that ethos. We call it IBRL, increased bandwidth, reduced latency. And there's this misnomer that kind of exists in crypto is that once you release your protocol and your spec, then it takes some grand change, a 2.0 or some branded upgrade in order to significantly improve the protocol. And that's not really the case in Solana. So Solana is a very efficient spec. And while we have some big changes coming down the line, it is much more about just good engineering of constant iteration and constant improvement. So over the last 4.5 years, 5.5 years maybe since mainnet launched, it's been very, very consistent improvements in all parts of the stack, every release. And our releases are very frequent. They're every few months, not years. So there's graphs that show this, like things like block times have decreased. TPS has increased very steadily over the last years.
Let's take a step back. For someone who's not familiar with all the chains, Solana started, you said 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. They've always been about speed. What do you think makes Solana unique, and why was Solana created?
Yeah. We are the first ones to really have performance first in mind. And so like every single part of the stack was thought of. So we didn't necessarily pin ourselves to any system that was out, like a Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other ones. It was from the ground up. If you want to create a new layer of the internet that passes around information where everybody agrees on that. So typically very heavy financial use cases there. What kind of financial information are you passing back and forth? What markets or value transfer are you having? What is the best system to create that? It's really that simple. And it creates, and this financial systems need accurate, up-to-date pricing data. It is a very time sensitive system. Having delayed pricing means you might have bad information on a buy or a sell, or delayed settlement will be a big friction to normal commerce. So that's kind of at the root of what we have built. That's like differentiation while keeping decentralization and security. Those are always the top in these kind of financial systems on any level, centralized or not. So in cryptography and a lot of other systems give you that. And I'm sure we'll get into some of those weeds, but I think there is a bit of a misnomer about both the decentralization of Solana and its stability. So Solana is a very decentralized protocol. It's completely permissionless. Anybody, like you could start a validator today just by going to one of the clients that's compatible with mainnet and downloading it and, the source code, compiling the source code locally. So there's nobody pushes to you. You can just permissionlessly take that code. Theoretically, you could even make your own code that met the spec if you could, that's a pretty big lift, but you could, but so we have multiple clients to choose from that, you just run Solana. And there's thousands of entities that do this. In order to be profitable, you need some SOL, the native token of Solana, but there's nothing else that prevents you from being a validator on Solana and actively build blocks. There's that side. And then the stability side is just engineering. So re-architecting every single part of the stack. Frankly, Solana was released similar to what I was saying earlier in like normal engineering practice, where you release early and really battle test your thing live. That's why it has the beta tag on it. And there was definitely instability at the beginning of the release process, but that has drastically improved over the last years. In the last 2.5 years, there's one downtime of 5 hours. We can kind of talk about the nuances of that, but it's been over 1.5 years since any downtime and very little instability in that entire time. So it is like the most important part of these things is, again, security, then stability. So that's like, again, part of our engineering mindset is to constantly be pushing the needle while maintaining those things.
Historically, Solana has always been very quick in adapting to the latest trends. They've been quick in adapting to NFTs. Then on DeFi, Solana is really strong. They had the meme coins. Solana seems to be always first on those new waves of innovations. Why do you think that's the case?
I think it's part of the culture, actually. So there's no entity that is like, okay, we're going to start a meme coin ecosystem. There's no single entity. It is an ecosystem so the culture of us as the protocol constantly integrating and putting forth tools is kind of similar culture. You attract a similar type of talent from the culture of, the ecosystem. They buy into they see this culture of like, this team is rapidly innovating. They're serving my needs. I'm a developer. I want to make sure that I'm set up for success. I have this business idea. And so the types of devs who are iterating and really product thinking tend to come to Solana. Like said another way, Solana or whatever there's no entity, no entity chose meme coins. Meme coin businesses chose Solana. And I think that's true for a lot of businesses. DePIN is also largely on Solana with Helium and Hive Mapper and Dawn and all these great DePIN projects. Geo.net ported over. There's many. And then payment providers are also doing great businesses on Solana. So it's not just memes. So I think meme coins will do something like more transactions per day than all on Solana than all other chains combined. Any transactions on all other chains. So there's a large part of it for sure, but there's also just a large part that's not meme coins on Solana. So I think that's why we tend to be new to a lot of things. The other thing is the cost structure of Solana is such that even if something blows up and does like blows up in terms of like growth, doesn't price out other businesses that are still exploring their product market fit because the fees stay low. There's sufficient capacity and there is isolation of markets that if my application is still fledgling and that doesn't necessarily have huge margins yet, I'm still my users are still paying small fees where they don't really notice any other spike on some other part of the network. Whereas another network that may have, small blocks or other global fee contention, if one adjacent industry starts doing well, it prices out other industries at that time. But that doesn't happen on Solana. The median, a way of measuring that is like kind of like median fees and the median fee stability, and that Solana's median fees are essentially stable in perpetuity. There's been very few spikes, like when Trump, like literally the president of the United States, launched his meme coin, then his wife did. Like that's like basically the only time in the last a year and a half where there's been any sort of median fee spike. So it's very stable for a variety of businesses at any given time.
Solana is one of the top general purpose blockchains. I
Mhm.
would probably also count Ethereum among that, Bitcoin. And how do you balance those different needs of those end users when you look at one corner, those super degen crypto
Yeah.
communities versus institutional users who want to use Solana for secure, high value use cases? How do you
Yeah.
balance that?
I think from a platform perspective, it's actually pretty simple. Again, that number one is security, then stability, then performance. Uh, what we're building is a really deep technical system, but the KPIs are pretty universally simple. If you're building just a flexible programming, um, then just those three things, and increased bandwidth, reduced latency is really kind of all you need to satisfy that general use case. Maybe said another way, like a lot of the financial infrastructure that we're disrupting is pretty archaic. It's kind of like it's pretty hard with all these entrenched systems, and um, a lot of them don't really have a clear owner on how to upgrade them, and yeah, so they end up just stagnating. And so it's having that be so having this like fast finality, very, very snappy system will serve both the meme coin kind of degen high frequency trader and the security minded, incredibly high value RWA or institutional plays. Yeah. So it's very simpler. I think there still are application level logic that you want to be able to customize. And we have different layers of the stack that will handle that. There's different relayers and different other things that will help with ordering. That gets into a pretty technical area, but you can do some customization on Solana, and there's applications and different parts of the stack that are releasing tools to do things that other chains would have to build like an entire custom stack for. You can still do that next to the rest of Solana.
You probably still have tons of colleagues that work in traditional industries, traditional finance. And if you talk to them and you had to explain them, why did you enter blockchain and what's the importance of blockchain and why does this concept make
Yeah.
sense? What would you tell them?
My origin story is pretty transferable, I think. So I was working in games. I was working at Riot Games, which is a very global, international brand. They make League of Legends and Valorant and a few other really hit games. And we do a lot of our distribution in multiple ways. So like we were contracting with Garena for kind of Southeast Asia, and China had its own distribution with Tencent. So there was these kind of fragmented distribution things. So we didn't really have all the data. That, and you have these third party esports organizations that would come in and offer their services, but we didn't really have a way of certifying whether they were scamming the players that we were trying to help set up, the esports teams that we were trying to set up businesses for. So there's just always problems with transparency, global payments, and at the same time there were some major new regions that were suffering from a bunch of chargebacks, and entities. Visa was even thinking about delaying our certifications. They were thinking about just cutting off all payments in certain like very high growth regions. And so you just look down these rabbit holes more and more and more, and you're like, well, just accepting crypto fixes a lot of these things. I mean, this is back in 2017 when I first started looking at this, and it was very practical. Like this solution just solves my problems, and yeah, then I started a business that was like basically related to all of that. But it's really simple. If you want this, digital high performance, like fast finality system that meets the world of business and automation today, blockchain just ends up solving a lot of those problems.
As a tech leader building daily on those solutions, how actively are you following the markets and the market cycles and everything that's happening out here?
I definitely have to be aware of it. I think a lot of times it's distracting. We're on this kind of infinite game where we're trying to constantly be creating these like information systems for as you upgrade hardware, you upgrade networking, you upgrade, eventually might get into neutrino communication. Like it really is this kind of like never ending economy and just a transformation that we want to facilitate. So any local thing that's very reflexive and narrative based tends to just kind of be a distraction from from the ultimate goal. Yeah. So I'm aware of it because it does affect the businesses on top, because we like, in order to get to a place where you're actually meeting the customers and solving their problems, you have to learn from them along the way. So every iteration is better, and you can get to a final destination. I don't claim to have some crystal ball that knows exactly what I need to build, for 10 years from now. And so working with our great ecosystem helps us get to a good place. So like IBRL gets us like maybe 80% of the way there, but like the actual thing that gets you product market fit is really just tackling every single 1% gain that you can for your users, which are applications and devs. So definitely versed, but yeah, it's not my main focus.
Do you have a thesis about how blockchains, and in particular Solana and the Solana ecosystem, is going to play out over the next couple of years? And do you have features or things you're building on that are aligning with that thesis?
Yeah, I have a part of it is very boring, where there's just value transfer is just way more efficient. Even Visa, they settle, they from the user perspective, they have the payment go through, and I get my candy bar or whatever. But from the merchant, Visa only settles once a day, 5 days a week. It's like at night sometime. And so if that does not meet the needs of kind of the next iteration of, we're entering into these autonomous systems, and not necessarily AGI or anything like that, just like faster moving businesses that are digital, that want that capital so they can, maybe purchase more compute or purchase more AI inference. Like if I'm just like an LLM wrapper that's serving some business, generating images or something, or generating text stories. If I get more business, I want to be able to pay those more to generate more stories or whatever else is making me money. If I have to wait for the settlement of the credit card payment to come in, that just slows my business down. So I think over the next 3 or 4 years, you're just going to start seeing businesses that accept cryptocurrency, or systems that use cryptocurrency rails underneath, are just going to move faster than businesses that don't. And they're going to be able to have access to global markets. They're going to, be able to have more creative business strategies. So that's like boring, but very, very, very functional. I think on top of that, once you start getting these flows that you can see, you're going to be, the capital formation is going to be much simpler. I have some capital expenditure I need for my business. I have some certifiable business model that now is more transparent than I'm getting it through. I will rev share you. I will buy back tokens or whatever for the upfront capital you give me, whatever that business model. It's very flexible. It's in code. It's transparent to what it is. There will be certainly some iteration on what exactly is good for investors and for the businesses themselves. But you're just going to see different types of assets that eases the friction of new types of businesses. And you've already seen that happen. This isn't theory. Pump.fun on Solana. It's highly varied. People are still figuring out what the actual valuation is, but it is as a business that, generates multi-million dollars a day and buys back some of their tokens, and everybody can kind of see when they do and don't buy back, and in the tokenomic model and everything. So it's very much happening today. And as they figure out the right model to their investors and their users, then you'll see more and more businesses take that on. There's several others as well, and that's like a social app. It is it's a meme coin, but also like a streaming platform where the streamers can basically have a representation of a token. And so it could be something that like rivals TikTok or Twitch or something like that eventually. There's plenty of other apps on Solana that do this. Time.fun is another. So there's basically this capital formation for different types of businesses that people are going to figure it out. DePIN is another one that did this even before that, which is kind of the helium approach, where they raised upfront capital and incentivized internet systems, G internet, with their token, and now they route T-Mobile and other data offboarding from actual carriers through their network and get paid for it. So I think you'll see a lot of these different types of models that are enabled because you have a much more efficient capital markets.
I wanted to ask you, and you mentioned a couple of use cases now, pumped up fun, helium.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that are currently being built or have been built on Solana that you're excited about?
I think there's the main product market fit with blockchain, not just Solana, but just blockchain today, are these kind of like speculative cases. So there's a bunch of, you've probably heard of Poly Market integrating with Twitter X, and that's kind of a prediction marketplaces. And there's some coming to Solana. Calci just integrated Solana, which I think is an interesting case. So you can start using I think you'll those prediction markets might even go more and more mainstream. Just like with any sort of financial product, you want to be able to do whatever hedging and risk mitigation strategy. And I actually think it might even start entering mainstream as a hedge in certain cases, where it's something you might find something correlated with whatever financial strategy you're doing. In the same way that like an airline is really into the futures markets for oil, for jet fuel. You might see some businesses getting into prediction markets for some hedging on some outcome that might be bad for their business. So I think that's like a very interesting exploration. You'll see a bunch of different iterations on that. Some of them are even going to potentially try to meet institutional demand, or like even like stuff like housing markets. Like if I think like the housing market in Seattle will go up, maybe if I want to buy in a year, I might like, buy in somehow to like kind of risk mitigate, like, oh, if it does go up, at least I get like some level of the price right now, and so some level of price stability. Or similarly, if I'm about to sell my house, I don't want the Seattle housing market to tank. Maybe I short the Seattle housing market just in case it does drop. I still get some risk mitigation when I sell my house. So like you'll start seeing some of these things actually enter into the normal world of finance as part of people's, whatever financial risk mitigation strategy. There's plenty of other things though too. There's very functional, like Sphere Pay is doing international business payments. You have just traditional kind of stock and equities coming on chain. You have kind of pre-market stocks, like they use like these debt security things, but there's SpaceX, a bunch of private Anduril, a bunch of private companies that have stock one-to-one backing on Solana. So you'll start seeing like a lot of these explorations around. They're almost like blockchains are really financial products. It's value transfer. It's um uh different markets and trading. So I think if you want to infuse that into other things like games or social products or stuff like that, those would be the blockchain elements, would be those. Yeah, that's kind of like the ecosystem that we're seeing building. And then the cool thing about Solana is it's all in one place. So you can actually potentially have all these things interoperable with each other. So you could have some highly liquid markets that you could execute a strategy across industries.
In 2019, 2020, we saw a big generational upgrade, I would say, for layer ones who had the switch
Yep.
from proof of work to proof of stake. And since then, all those blockchains have become a lot more cheaper and a lot more faster.
Yep.
What do you think is the next iteration or generational upgrade? And what are you excited about from a technological perspective?
So Solana is the most efficient spec of all of those. Other blockchains have made different design decisions. First of all, I want to say that often what is cited here is what's called a trilemma, and that was mostly a blog that Vitalik or a couple others kind of proliferated a while back. I think they've actually since taken it down because it's not a proof. There are some fundamental engineering principles. One is called the CAP theorem. That is it talks about availability and consistency. So that is a very provable thing. The trilemma about scalability, decentralization, and security, that is not, it's not actually a principled argument. So Solana is certainly at some scale, there's probably some trade-offs. There's trade-offs with engineering everywhere, but it's not like some certainty that just because one protocol is faster or cheaper than another, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not as secure. So like the lack of stability that that you saw in Solana in the early years was just because of very, very new tech. It wasn't because of some spec issue that is related to Solana. So I think the thing that we're seeing is just like, again, that gradual uh, fruition of our tech. And then we have some very big upgrades to get to like kind of like, I don't know, like a local end state. Job's never done, but we have a consensus algorithm that provably gets to the fastest consensus time in a globally distributed system. We have some of the best researchers, consensus researchers in the world. We hired them directly from ETH Zurich. Nothing to do with Ethereum, but it's a premier engineering university in Sweden, and we hired them, or sorry, Switzerland, in Zurich. So we hired them on to make a new consensus algorithm, and I can get into the technicals, but it's very provable that it works. And it's a very simple but very elegant and fast algorithm that reaches finality in like around 150 milliseconds. So it's like kind of like internet speeds. So there's that. And then long term, there's even like bigger upgrades that make Solana competitive as just like a information system. So right now, there's no claim that Solana can be faster than NASDAQ. NASDAQ works on microseconds, but it is in like an isolated system. It doesn't interact directly with like a payment layer. It is just a trading optimization. But just for that one purpose, Solana doesn't compete. It's, we have this whole consensus thing that we have to bring to thousands of validators around the world. But there is an upgrade that we are currently designing that's like pretty well baked at this point. It's called multiple concurrent leaders. And that's where multiple block builders around the world can be making blocks together at the same time. And that basically means that if I'm in Tokyo and I get some information, I can have my local block builder include that transaction in microseconds. And same can be true for somebody in New York. Same can be true for somebody in Dubai. Same can be true for somebody in wherever in the world. They can guarantee that they can inclusion guarantees from their local validator in those microseconds and still have it be synced to this global market. So that is a slightly different system than NASDAQ today, but it has different trade-offs. So you still have to wait a little bit longer for all of the financial interaction, like to see how it actually interacted with all the other information, but you can get your inclusion assurances near instantly anywhere in the world under that multiple concurrent leader design, where if I'm in Tokyo and I'm trying to trade on the New York Stock Exchange, I have to wait for New York to get back to me whether that trade went through or whether that my trade was going to be executed. So it's like a rather huge upgrade and really starts making Solana have not just security and global assurances and being like this kind of independent financial system. It actually gives it performance properties that are better than any centralized system can be. So it's not just about decentralization from an ethos or like a self-control purpose, which is very valid, but it adds in like a performance and information guarantee, like inclusion guarantee over a centralized system.
Are there any institutional use cases that are already testing things like that on Solana right now?
I mean, the main one is a lot of these, not MCP specifically, but Solana already is a globally distributed system that entities all over the world participate in. A lot of global access is kind of like the main one. If you want somebody in, I don't know, some rural place to, be able to have access to the US dollar or equities, you start seeing institutions offer their stuff on Solana. So a few institutional examples, Galaxy just announced yesterday that they're tokenizing their stock on their actual, equity stock on Solana. Another good one is R3 Corda. They work with a lot of institutions and they're usually in these like private blockchains, but they want access to global liquid markets. So they're executing on Solana mainnet, a lot of their strategy. And they carry a lot of different types of securities or debt instruments. Like this gets a little bit. They have so many things. So so now they're going to access to markets and liquidity of mainnet. And the really interesting thing about this, maybe I haven't mentioned this quite yet. Like one of the other benefits of decentralization that's not just for the protocol is that any entrepreneur now can see the assets that they're issuing and see how to interact with them. They don't need R3 Quarters approval. They just can formulate a business and add value to R3 Quarters offering just by knowing how to interact with those assets. So if they want to make a marketplace or some derivatives market, whatever they can. And if users like it, they can use it. So it's like right now, if I want a financial product and I'm using Fidelity, I'm kind of beholden to everything that Fidelity services me as a user. Whereas on a blockchain, anybody can kind of give that service for a user. And it really, and like institutions certainly have some hesitancy there because they don't want their assets to be used in a way they don't want, or security risks and otherwise. But it does make a much more open ecosystem where they don't have to build everything. So there's obvious benefits in terms of liquidity and global access, because the other thing that they don't have to worry about is on-ramp, off-ramps everywhere in the world. Other people are doing that for them so that everybody has access. So that's like one of the easiest examples of what I'm talking about is as an R3 quarter, I don't need to build onboarding to every single continent and every single region. People are doing that for me, and I still get the benefit, and my users still get the benefit for me because they get to buy in or whatever from globally. All I have to do is make sure I'm issuing the assets in the best way possible, or whatever that business is. And then you can get into all the other pieces. But that access and that liquidity is very attractive to institutions.
And from an institutional perspective, how do you think about privacy? We've seen the first blockchains now positioning themselves as a kind of private blockchain. We see blockchains like Canton, blockchains like Avalanche, who allow you to create Avalanche subchains, Polkadot parachains. How do you think about privacy?
First, this is kind of go back to what I was saying earlier with increased bandwidth, reduced latency. Privacy is just math. It's like cryptography and we don't have to get into like all the mumbo jumbo, but it just requires a little bit more advanced computing. So the more and more efficient you make the underlying system, that is Solana, the more and more there can be privacy layers that just make use of that in an inefficient way. So we actually view it as one and the same. And you're seeing that already. We have a confidential balances feature baked in directly with some of the token standards. And that's basically, it doesn't often, like if I send token to you, it shows up on the ledger that I'm transferring to you, but it makes the balances confidential. So it doesn't know if I'm saying 5 USDC or 20 or 40. You just know there's a transfer. There's other protocols that are obfuscating the entire thing, the entire transfer, but still allows for value transfer. And then there are privacy layers we call them network extensions. One example that was just announced this summer is called Magic Block. And what they do is they kind of allow you to either mint or issue some token and kind of delegate it to a private trusted execution environment. And then you can still run any code that you want that's on Solana. You can run markets, you can run whatever, but it's done in an environment that is hidden from public view. And then if you want to access Solana liquidity, you still have all of the proofs in the state right there that you can trade on the public layer and still interact with some of these others. So you're starting to see like different approaches to privacy, either like a network extension where you're happening in this trust execution environment, you're getting it directly on mainnet with cryptography. We see I can't quite name all of them. They're still in stealth, but there's basically just a bunch of different privacy solutions. One of the ones I can talk about because it's just kind of known is there's basically ways of doing kind of ZK attestations. So as a user, or like a credentialer, you can certify something. So like this isn't going to happen anytime soon. Maybe, hopefully it will. But so like say like the United States of America wants to start issuing passports, credentials on chain. They could do so in a way that just has a proof of all the information on my passport, like my nationality, my age or whatever. But it could be private what that information actually was. And I could just, as a user, just issue statements like, I am an American, and it would say yes. I am over the age of 21, and it would say yes. And so I wouldn't have to give away all of my personal information about my exact birth date or my address or anything like that. It would just be in this cryptographic proof on chain, and so it's like a sense of privacy of that. So it's like that's just and that same thing could be used for arbitrary information, like my income or any accreditation I've achieved, like a pilot's license or anything. So and this is actually the way I think any sort of credentialing should be done, because a lot of credentialing, you really only need one part of it in order to certify something, a loan or some access to something. You don't need to know every single thing about the service or the credential that I obtained. So we're going to see that more and more. And we already have this Solana attestation service that helps issuers with this process. And yeah, adding privacy on that is it's a natural extension of that feature that people are utilizing. So again, just to summarize, you're seeing it in terms of like balances and transfers, but also just raw information or just like compute entirely. It's really like, and that's the part of being like part of Solana's ethos is being that this new layer of the internet is connecting all of these different types of privacy layers, and then it's just up to the users and the businesses to figure out um, what people like care about using on any given day.
And Matt, I feel like I have to ask you that because I hear it over and over again. Many people are talking about quantum proof of blockchains. What do you think about that? Are blockchains quantum proof?
So quantum security is definitely something that we are actively tracking. I'm actually a mentor to a quantum accelerator here in Seattle called Barclow. We're very much like in the conversation about the timelines and also the quantum secure cryptography, because there's always like that 0 day or the Q day, some people call it, where quantum computers can break common cryptography that's used across the internet. There's an algorithm called Shor's algorithm. So basically, anytime you sign something, it's like a factorization mechanism, and Shor's algorithm can reverse engineer that. So that's the attack mechanism. That's why you actually see a lot of people just moving their funds to a new wallet that has never signed anything before, because the initial attack case is only on wallets that have signed something before. So you're actually pretty safe if you haven't. But there's already on Solana quantum secure vaults. So it would require both a signature from ED25519, which Solana uses, but it also requires a signature from a quantum secure algorithm. And you can execute strategies from those quantum secure vaults. And all they take is more compute. So again, it goes back to the more performant you make the underlying layer, the more room you have to execute more advanced cryptography. That's really it. So I know it's a very common theme of this entire thing, but it's just such a core principle in engineering is that if you make the underlying system more efficient, you can do more things and you can have more efficient markets and apps. So eventually even today we have enough capacity on Solana to do way more advanced cryptography. The challenge is just going to be the crossover, because eventually we're going to have to make it so all signing mechanisms on Solana use quantum secure cryptography. And so like the addresses will have to change and other things. But we are actually very much underway on that. We have a team that is doing, or actually multiple teams now that are doing quantum secure Solana, both analysis of different signing mechanisms and also transformation plans. So how do you get the ecosystem and the wallets to get people to move over to different addresses and things. Both those things are going underway, and we are very much ahead of the game. I think that's the main thing here, keeping track of all the advancements, and so there's not going to be surprises.
Mm-hmm.
I think, okay, actually, maybe I'll say this another way. I think when people hear these like very deeply secure things, it comes off as like very scary, right? Like, because but like from my point of view, like a normal engineer will just tell you that it's like there's always going to be some risk of just technology flourishing, or some outage here or there. Like these are all like pretty standard engineering problems, and these are very standard engineering solutions. So it's not scary for us. It's just what is the trade-offs in improving to meet the needs of the engineering problem. And so I understand why people are scared, because it does change a lot of things. But yeah, this is very much within our wheelhouse to upgrade.
Super fascinating. Matt, last topic I want to touch on is AI. There was a time about 6 months ago where we had that AI boom, and I would say almost the bust, and everyone was trying to figure out how can they position their chain more actively in AI.
Yeah.
What are you doing in AI, and how do you see that coming together with blockchain and Solana?
Yeah, I actually have a background in AI. I was the head of machine learning engineering at Unity, which is a game. So we were doing like simulated training and simulated compute and a bunch of other stuff for AI training, as well as making like AI bots for robotics, like kind of simulating warehouse use cases and other things. So anyway, I'm very in tune to kind of the needs of AI. I think you're right that a lot of people kind of really got ahead of themselves and they went right to like or provably owned AI and all these things that we don't even really have AI assistants yet, other than just kind of like voice prompt things. That I wouldn't say there's not many AI that are like actively running our lives yet. So like owning them is kind of cart before the horse. There are some very functional things happening though. Data collect. I think what you'll first start seeing is kind of the training process. So from like data collection, annotation, and training, and a lot of that like infrastructure side, you'll start seeing like really start getting some adoption, and that's already happening today. There's a lot of the DePIN companies I mentioned earlier are essentially data collection companies, and AI is a prime use case for that. Like HiveMapper has partnerships with Lyft and Volkswagen, I think, and a few others, and a lot of that data gets used for AI purposes. They do mapping, so they take live, like a more up to date street views, and so people can use those and whatever AI models they have to update traffic information or lane closures, that kind of stuff. Other side of it, so that's like the inference and the training side of it. There's also inference side, which is also just infrastructure, you know, buying GPUs and obtaining GPUs for much cheaper, and so you don't have to always go through very expensive data centers. And yeah, and then there's also then using AI on our side. So this is where up to now, I've talked about AI using blockchain. I think it's just going to be very functional for the next couple of years. Uh, the other side of it is like how the blockchains use AI. And I think that one actually gets pretty interesting because one of the early product market fits of AI is helping coders, because we're up like we people making the AI know the coding problem because they're coders themselves. So it actually makes a lot of sense that it's one of the more refined things. So people kind of joke that like I think there's this weird view that AI was going to replace like all the manual labor. That's actually the hardest thing for AI to solve. Like translating an AI algorithm to something that works with all like the nuance of like little motors and like robotics and all the variations that can happen with wind and dew points and like literally anything. Like, but when you have completely digital systems, it actually is much easier for AI to just learn exactly what to pattern match there and do that. So things like radiology and like a lot of things that we actually think are professional degrees, which includes like radiology, lawyers, and stuff like that, but also coding. So we want to be very in tune to how to help the AI help coders. We don't think it's going to completely replace coders anytime soon. It's just going to allow you to build applications in a much, much easier way. Like maybe, 5 years ago and prior, there's like this huge SEO push. Like been making a good business is, can you efficiently appear top on search engines and get like, there's always like golden gooses of like, can you find a highly searched thing that doesn't cost a lot and form a business off of it? Now that's actually translating into how can you make your updates to your platform as AI readable as possible? So when somebody asks about making an application, you get recommended. So like that's like a thing that a lot of like different providers are pushing for. So like if you want
And
to
it,
make payments, eventually you want Solana just to be like, hey, AI to be like, this is a good solution, is if you want to issue an asset or do payments, here's like the way to do that on Solana. And then there's even like the lower level system than that is, how to make your docs whenever you update something, because we're constantly iterating and improving the chain. And sometimes we change or add a new feature. How do we make sure the AI is reading that correctly live, has the discoverability issue? And so that's like the next generation of like SEO type of thinking that we're very much in tune to. So we put out a RAG system. We put out our own, like multi MCP servers, and are working with several different AI systems to read our docs better. So it's really kind of like all encompassing thing to kind of like be involved in this evolution. I will say though, I had this. I think this was on like the All In podcast or something a little while ago, but they described what's happening in AI as an evolution, not a revolution. And I think that's kind of a good framing. So I understand why people think like a bubble popped or whatever. I think people just expected this idea of a singularity where AI just starts taking over to happen right away. And I think there's frankly just like a lot of engineer energy and infrastructure and other just like limitations that make it like hard for that to do right away. What I think we'll see is just evolution, where businesses will just adopt certain parts more and more. Like individual employees will just use it to make more efficient workflows. And yeah, and frankly, part of that is if an AI finding the most efficient workflow, we just want to be there to be the most efficient payment workflow uh, for that, and use the most liquid markets. So like when I say things like finance tends to flow to that of least friction, AI is just going to find the thing with least friction, and the user may not even necessarily know how it was able to pay the person halfway across the world and access some market that they didn't know how to access themselves, but the AI just figured it out, and it just happened to be on Solana. So that's like, yeah, that's the kind of where we're going.
And I fully agree with what you were saying about the progress. It definitely feels like, at least from a user side, on the models themselves, the progress is slowing down. So the jump from
Yeah.
GPT-3 to GPT-4 was bigger than what we now saw with GPT-4 to 5, for example. Yeah. And
Yep.
also a
Yep.
funny anecdote to what you said before. I think Brian Armstrong, founder of Coinbase, tweeted that yesterday that they are already coding 50% of their
Yep.
total code
Exactly.
base
Yeah.
with AI, and they want to bring it to 60% in the next months.
Yep. Yeah. And we want to allow people to do that for Solana too. It's a little bit harder so I'm sure that includes like their website and other, like they have a lot of features that aren't just their financial features. But yeah, like when you're making really, really low level systems, and not just like the front end JavaScript stuff, it's a little bit harder for us to use it on the core protocol. But yeah, we want to make app development on Solana as simple as that. We want people to just be able to say, I want to accept payments, I want to make a trading bot, I want to execute the strategy, and then just have the AI be able to take off. So I think that's kind of where things are going for sure.
Yeah, and actually the highest rate that he mentioned was Space. So they used the highest rate of AI, and the
Oh, that's
lowest rate
crazy.
was yeah,
Never
for
mind.
their institutional product, that was the lowest rate. I think about 40%. Base was around 60. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's surprising. I'll be honest, because like the way it works is it's just pattern matching. Like what are the systems that have already been built that you can kind of save a lot of time by, especially like cross integrations, like mixing this API with this front end element and stuff like that. It's really good at just knowing how to do that thing. And there may not be like, it's really hard for a human to write individual docs on how every single API should interact with every single API, but there is some code for it living on GitHub somewhere that it's much easier for the AI to just read all that and know how to do it. It's really the typical use cases typically don't get into core protocols that is like very custom and novel systems, but I'm sure Base probably has some so some systems that are maybe cryptography based or something that's like kind of like known systems that they're kind of reproducing. But I would not have guessed that, obviously.
As a last question, is there anything you would like people to know about Solana, about blockchain, that you think is important?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that I think a lot of people still have a misunderstanding of blockchain. I think it's because it's very deep tech. It involves these crazy terms, cryptography. We've talked about quantum, consensus, blah, 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 blah. But really what you need to know is like, there really wasn't a way to have own a digital thing. And so like you can have this digital thing that only you can choose where it gets used, and how to transfer to somebody else, all that stuff. Like there was IP rights, and there were individual platforms that would broker things to you that were kind of digital, but there's no real way for me to just independently own a digital thing until blockchain. And that's really kind of where we're going, because more and more things are becoming digital. And if you can also make settlement times fast, and that and that's why people call it sovereign money. There's all these different ways of saying it, but it really is that simple. And that's why the Clarity Act is really kind of trying to define what digital assets are. And I think lawmakers seem to really understand it, actually, because they don't really know how to write law around digital things yet. And so they see like, oh, we have this blockchain thing where you have a person who owns the ability to sign whatever kind of thing they want to do with this asset. This is functionally new. This is not something that was able to be done before. So I think at the end of the day, any institution or individual should start thinking of like, what are the digital parts of my business, or what things would I like to digitize, make digital, more global, and how does that fit in? So it really is that simple. It's not like the core like delivery to the user is pretty simple. I can now own digital things.
Thank you, Matt. That was a wonderful ending word. Now, a quick lightning round. Those are short questions, short answers. A book or podcast that influenced your thinking on technology?
Oh wow. I don't know. I mean, I've been going through this quantum book actually. It's kind of like the intro to quantum. I think is very influential in how I think about the world. The world is way different. Like we in our eyes and our ears, like our senses, kind of like distill the world down to something that seems way more deterministic than it actually is. We actually live in a world that's has to deal with way more probabilistic behaviors, and even when light shines, it's kind of like exploring all possible paths, and we just kind of observe, and like our mind coalesces it to one path. But yeah, there's just a lot more actually going on with our universe that um yeah, is just not something that we would interact with day to day. And I think it kind of opens your mind to not necessarily being stuck in whatever bubble that you might be in, your problems of the day or whatever. These are kind of like other things that we as humans have evolved to kind of really, really care about, because so this is a lightning round, but like we've evolved to really care about like things that won't kill us, right? Like so we've kind of distilled our world to these very simple terms. But I think like learning much more about quantum and these other like base physical properties of our world, or physics properties of our world, really shows you that yeah, there's a lot more nuance and intricacies that we can't like always perceive every day.
Mhm.
Good.
Next one, proof of work or proof of stake?
I mean, I don't think you need to have a choice. I mean, and different ones work for different things. Like proof of work is a you know like hard money, like a distribution thing. Proof of stake is like very efficient at securing a network that is financial and does arbitrary things for like arbitrary businesses. It's like just slightly different trade-offs. Also, the
Mhm.
book is called Introduction to Quantum Mechanics. So
Perfect.
I knew it was like Intro to Quantum. I just didn't remember that. Yeah, it's by
Yep.
David Griffiths and Schroeder. So like Schroeder's cat. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that I know that these like there's like spicy Twitter debates about proof of work versus proof of stake. I just think that engineering trade-offs with everything. I mean, I can go into like the details, but like proof of work, like if you're trying to be a super fast system, proof of work is kind of like a varied mechanism. So some variance on based on difficulty rates and stuff. So block times can't be as syncopated. So if you're trying to build the most high performance systems that runs financial applications that are arbitrary, proof of stake has a much more consistent leader schedule. That's actually one of the main innovations of Solana with proof of history. It will change slightly with Alpenglow is like having, but it's having this leader schedule that is very tight. I go and then you go and then the next leader goes, and like there's very as minimal gaps between all the leaders as possible. Everybody knows when they it's their turn to go. With the proof of work, the next leader is just the winner of some contest. So it's both varied on the block length and who goes next. So they have to like rehypothecate the network just when the next block builder is building their block, who's going. And then it's also just because of the lack of determinism of the next block, the finality tends to be a little bit longer. So it works really, really well. Proof of work works really, really well if you're trying to have this like distribution mechanism across blocks that is just based on like hard work. And like I understand, like, I believe in Bitcoin's great. Like it's hard money, and it's like globally liquid. It's probably the most globally liquid asset in the world because of this like access. But if you're trying to build like a highly performant system that's still decentralized, proof of stake tends to be better.
The first cryptocurrency you've ever bought and the last you'll ever sell?
That's a good one. I think the first like kind of, I mean, my first one was Bitcoin, but the first one that was kind of weird. I actually bought some Qtum at the time, and it was like I kind of like they like the idea of kind of like a hybrid of both like UTXO model and a like general purpose like Turing complete language. And so in fact, like yeah, there's like a few blockchains that have done various forms of that over time. And I no longer like whatever. I don't mean to talk trash about any given token, but yeah, that was like kind of like my first exploration to something that's not a Bitcoin. The last token I'll ever sell, I mean, probably Solana. Like I think, I mean, I'll always be a user of Solana, and I want to be involved in the governance. So I just don't see a reason why, no matter what the token will trade at, like being just involved, like being a voter, active voter, and participant in the network, I would say why I would ever sell all of it.
Cool. And last one, if you had to describe Solana's competitive edge to a CTO in one sentence, what would you tell him or her?
Oh wow. I mean, other people are probably way better at like these marketing things than me, but I mean, I think it's just internet scale capital markets where you can, internet scale capital markets. Like that's what Solana is hyper focused on delivering.
Cool. Matt, where can people learn more about you, about Solana?
Solana, hopefully Solana.com. Like a lot of communication also happens on Twitter through our handle, like @Solana. I am actually hilariously more on LinkedIn. I try to go where other people aren't, just establish my lane. But I'm just Matt Sorg on LinkedIn.
Matt, thanks a lot for coming on the show. It was a really wonderful discussion with you, super interesting, and I wish you all the best.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a great time.